The nurse smiled politely and said, "We'll get your admission paperwork started, Mrs. Wilson. Your son said he'd be back soon." But the way she hesitated told me the truth. Gregory wasn't coming back anytime soon. I pressed my hand against my chest, the spot that had burned with pain earlier, and watched his shiny black Audi disappear from the hospital parking lot. "Just a quick business meeting, Mom. I'll reschedule. But these investors are only in town today." That's what he'd said, glancing at his Rolex as if I wasn't even sitting there in pain. His wife, Vanessa, couldn't come. Either she had a charity luncheon. You understand, right? Of course I did. I'd been understanding for 42 years. The triage nurse gently guided me behind a curtain. "Family emergency?" she asked as she helped me onto the exam table. "Very important meeting," I said with a half smile. The words tasted bitter, like disappointment I'd swallowed too many times. She raised an eyebrow. "On a Saturday." I didn't answer, though in my head I thought, that's not dedication, that's neglect. But I had become very good at not saying things, just like I hadn't told anyone, not even my best friend Maggie, about the lottery ticket. I'd bought it 2 weeks ago at Henderson's grocery, choosing numbers from Gregory's birthday and the date Thomas, my husband, died in that awful construction accident. When I checked the ticket 2 days ago, I nearly fainted. 6 matching numbers, $4 million. My whole life changed in an instant. And yet I'd kept the ticket tucked into page 247 of my old copy of Jane Eyre, right where Jane leaves Rochester, a secret waiting for the right time. "You might be here a while," the nurse said as she attached wires to my chest. I nodded, thinking of Gregory's casual wave as he left. 8 hours. That's how long I sat alone in that hospital room, while my only son was not in a business meeting but playing golf at Cedar Hills. I found out later from his wife's Instagram pictures of cocktails, laughing clients, hashtags like #WorkHardPlayHard. This was the same son I worked summer school and night classes to put through college, the same son who now lived in a lakefront mansion, while I stayed in the little rambler where I raised him after Thomas died, the same son who only called on holidays and always had an excuse for why I couldn't see my grandchildren. "Just a few tests, Mrs. Wilson," the doctor said kindly. "Have you been under unusual stress lately?" I almost laughed. Was winning $4 million stressful? Or realizing that even with money, you could still be completely alone? I just gave him my practiced teacher smile and said, "Just the usual." The hours dragged. Blood drawn, machines beeping, doctors asking the same questions. Finally, the cardiologist came in. "Angina," he said, "stress relief. I'd like to keep you overnight." I nodded. At least here someone checked on me. The nurse glanced at my chart. "Should we call your son and let him know you're being admitted?" "He's in an important meeting," I said automatically. The phrase slipped out as easily as breathing. She gave me a sharp look. "Mrs. Wilson, you're having heart problems. That's more important than any meeting." Before I could answer, a young nurse walked in. Her name tag read Sophia Mendez, RN. She had a smile that lit up her whole face, and for a moment it made my chest ache in a different way. "I'll be with you tonight, Mrs. Wilson," she said kindly. "Let's get you settled upstairs. Have you eaten today?" I realized I hadn't, not since toast and tea before I collapsed. "I'll bring you something," she promised, squeezing my hand. "Hospital food isn't great, but it's better than nothing." As she pushed me in the wheelchair, my phone buzzed. A text from Gregory. "Meeting running long. How's it going there? Need anything?" What I needed was a son who didn't leave his mother alone in an emergency room. What I needed was family who loved me for me, not for what I could give them. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I had to do. I needed to put myself first. I texted back, "No, everything's fine." Another small lie in a long collection of them. As Sophia wheeled me past families gathered around their loved ones, I made a choice. I would keep the money to myself for now, not forever, but long enough to see who cared about me for me and who cared because of what I could give. Sophia glanced at my phone. "Your son?" she asked. "Yes," I said, tucking it away. "But he's very busy." "Too busy for this?" she asked bluntly. And for once I had no quick answer. The elevator closed on the emergency room where I'd sat alone for 8 hours, and I felt something strange and new. Gratitude for the pain that had pushed me to this point, for the son who'd left me, and for the 4 million reasons I now had to think about myself. My room smelled like bleach and old soap, and the things the last patients left behind, a tube of lipstick in the bathroom, a crushed pamphlet about diabetes in the trash, showed it had been lived in. The doctor had said I'd be there at least 24 hours, so the small, sterile room would be mine for a while. Sophia brought a tray with soup, a sandwich, and a wobbling cup of jello, then pulled up a chair and stayed with me while I ate, steady and kind. Call your son again, she suggested, checking my phone. Even busy people make time for a hospital visit. I smiled out of habit and started to deflect. But before I could, my phone rang. Maggie, Dorothy, where are you? I've been knocking at your door for 10 minutes, she said, all breath and concern. I told her Mercy General, a little episode, keeping me overnight. What? Why didn't you call me? She cried, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. I'm coming right now. I told her it wasn't necessary, and she cut me off with the bluntness only a true friend has. Shut up, Dorothy. 20 minutes later she burst in, hair a little mussed, arms full of a nightgown, toiletries, and a paperback mystery. She hugged me hard. You gave me a real scare, she said. I told her it was angina. Then she asked where Gregory was. When I said he had an important meeting, she snorted, still making excuses for him. I see, he's 42 with a corner office and a 7-figure salary. His career is built. When are you going to admit he treats you like an afterthought? Her words cut because they matched thoughts I'd been pushing down for years, thoughts that had grown louder since the lottery ticket had opened up new choices. Actually, I said slowly, I've been doing some thinking. Maggie leaned in, curious and a little worried. What kind of thinking? She asked. I hesitated. I hadn't decided how much to tell her, but I knew I wanted more than the life I'd had. Right then Sophia came back with my evening meds, followed by Dr. Harris, a tall, distinguished man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Wilson, I'll be overseeing your care tonight, he said in a soft voice that sounded a little southern. He went over my chart, stress-induced angina, some unusual blood markers to watch, and a recommendation to stay overnight. When he asked if I lived alone, Maggie answered for me, sharp as ever. Yes, but she has a son who's apparently too busy to be here. Dr. Harris kept his face calm and professional, and I felt, for the first time in a long while, that I wasn't the only one paying attention to me. He smiled and a single dimple showed. It's good you have support, Mrs. Wilson, he said. These episodes can be warning signs we shouldn't ignore. After he checked me and explained the tests for tomorrow, he patted my arm before leaving a touch that lingered just a moment longer than felt necessary. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Dr. Handsome seems attentive. Don't be ridiculous, I said, feeling my cheeks warm. He's just doing his job, ma'am, and I'm just noticing he's not wearing a wedding ring, she teased. Then she went serious. Now spill it. What's this life-changing opportunity? I looked at Maggie's eager face and made a choice. I whispered, I won the lottery. I glanced at the door to make sure no one was listening. $4 million. Maggie's jaw dropped. For the first time in our long friendship, she was speechless. The Minnesota Mega, the one with the Tuesday drawing? She finally said. I nodded. And you haven't told Gregory? No one. Just you. I leaned forward. And I'm not going to tell him. Not yet. Why not? This fixes everything, Maggie said. You could stop worrying about money, travel, move somewhere warm. That's exactly why, I said. If I tell Gregory, I'll never know if he's kind to me because he truly cares, or because of the money. I want to see how he treats me without knowing. Maggie understood then. You want to find out if he really cares, she said softly. I told her how I'd made excuses for Gregory my whole adult life, saying he was busy, building something important, that he'd have time later. Today, sitting alone in the emergency room, I finally saw the truth. He takes me for granted. I realized I helped make it easy for him by always being available. Maggie took my hand. Serious now. So what's the plan, besides letting your best friend know you're rich? She asked. I laughed and felt the tension break. I'm going to watch and wait. See how Gregory and Vanessa act when they think nothing's changed. Then, I'm going to really live, for the rest of my years. At that moment, my phone buzzed. A text from Gregory. Sorry about today. Super busy. Vanessa says hi. We'll try to visit tomorrow if the meeting wraps early. Maggie read it over my shoulder and snorted. I showed her Vanessa's Instagram, from the golf course, pictures of drinks and laughs. So, the important meeting was golf, I said quietly. Exactly why I'm keeping my secret. 4 million makes busy people find time. Night came, and Maggie left with promises to be back in the morning. I lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Not because of the money alone, but because I finally saw things clearly. The real tests would come. the medical ones for my heart, and the harder tests of family and courage. I felt ready. They discharged me Sunday afternoon with a prescription, a referral to a cardiologist, and strict orders to reduce stress. Dr. Harris said it gently. Family can be our greatest support, or our greatest stress. I surprised myself and asked, which was yours? He paused, then said, both, at different times. I told him about my son's spotty visits and my daughter who called once a month for 15 minutes. He smiled a little. Better than nothing, I muttered. Dr. Harris handed me his card, his direct number, and I tucked it into my purse, next to the folded lottery ticket that now stood for more than money. Thank you, doctor, I said. Robert, he corrected with a friendly nod. Use the number if you need anything. Sophia came back with a wheelchair. Ready for freedom, Mrs. Wilson? She asked. More than you know, I whispered, and felt Dr. Harris's steady eyes on me as Sophia rolled me toward the elevator. Your friend is waiting downstairs, the nurse said with a smile, the one with the purple glasses and the big laugh. Maggie, I nodded. She and I had been friends since we started teaching back in 1979. That's wonderful, Sophia, the nurse said. My mom always tells me true friends are God's way of making up for the family we don't get to choose. I laughed. Your mother sounds very wise. She is, Sophia said proudly. She cleaned houses for rich families for 30 years just so I could go to nursing school. Now I take care of her. That's how family should be. Her words stayed with me as she helped me into Maggie's waiting Subaru. Call me if you need anything, Sophia said, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. I'll be your nurse for the follow-up visits this week. You've got a fan, Maggie teased as we drove away. Maybe even a doctor admirer. Did you see the way Dr. Dreamboat looked at you? Don't be ridiculous, I said, though I couldn't help remembering Dr. Robert's warm smile and the dimple in his cheek. He's just thorough, MMHM, Maggie smirked, thoroughly interested. She turned onto Maple Street. So, lottery winner, what now? Champagne? A shopping spree? Moving somewhere without Minnesota winters? Not yet, I said firmly. First, we watch. I want to see how Gregory and Vanessa act when they think nothing has changed. Then, I'll decide who deserves to be part of my new life. That evening, my observation period began. Gregory and Vanessa showed up for the first time in 3 months, arriving exactly at 6:30, without the twins, carrying a grocery store bouquet and a rotisserie chicken. We can't stay long, Mom, Gregory said, checking his watch. The Hendersons invited us for drinks at 8. Vanessa kissed my cheek, her diamond earrings sparkling. Well, the hospital didn't mess up your hair too badly, she said, as if that was the most important thing after a heart scare. Just my heart, dear, I replied. How are the twins at their sleepover? Gregory barely looked up from his phone. So, what exactly happened? Your text wasn't clear. I explained the diagnosis while heating the chicken they'd brought. Vanessa nodded here and there, but she was busy judging my living room. You really should redecorate, Dorothy, she said, pulling at my curtains. It's so dated on a teacher's pension. I'm afraid dated is all I can afford, I said, raising an eyebrow. Gregory finally looked up. Speaking of money, Mom, have you thought about that assisted living place we sent you? Golden Sunset Acres is affordable, and you wouldn't have to worry about upkeep. Ah, yes. The conversation they'd been pushing for 2 years, a cheap facility, far from their lake house, making visits even less likely. I'm comfortable here, I told them, setting out plates I knew they wouldn't use. This house is paid off, and I know all my neighbors. But after this heart scare, Vanessa began. Angina, I corrected, not a heart attack. Still, Gregory added, you're not getting younger. What if something happens while you're alone? The same son who left me waiting in the ER for 8 hours was now worried about me being alone. I swallowed the sharp words I wanted to say. I'll manage, I said calmly. Sophia will be checking on me, and Maggie lives just 3 blocks away. Who's Sophia? Vanessa asked, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow. My home health nurse, I said with a smile, remembering Sophia's kindness. She visited 3 times this week. Gregory glanced at his watch again. We should go. The Hendersons are very punctual. And with that, they left chicken untouched, promises to call soon, hanging in the air. I stood at the window as their BMW drove off, mentally taking notes like the teacher I'd been for 35 years. Observation 1, a 20-minute visit after a hospitalization. Observation 2, no offer of help. Observation 3, straight back to pushing me into a facility. The truth was obvious. To them, I wasn't a mother to Lovey, was a problem to manage. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hope you're settling in. Missing hospital food yet? Robert, Dr. Harris. A smile tugged at my lips. Before I could answer, my landline rang. Maggie's eager voice filled my ear. Well, how was the Golden Boys' visit? Educational, I said, settling into my armchair. And brief. They had a social engagement. Of course they did, Maggie snorted. So, what's your next move? Powerball. I ran my fingers over the folded lottery ticket in my pocket, the one I carried everywhere now. It felt like a secret key, proof that everything in my life had changed even if no one else knew it yet. I think, I said slowly, it's time to dangle a little carrot and see what happens. A carrot. Maggie tilted her head. Yes, tomorrow, I'll casually mention that Aunt Beatrice's estate finally settled, and that I'm getting a modest inheritance. Nothing outrageous, maybe $75,000. Maggie laughed, clapping her hands. Oh, that's perfect. Just enough to catch their attention, but not so much that they'll see dollar signs in their eyes. I grinned. I'm learning to be clever. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at Robert's earlier text again. I'm learning a lot, actually. After hanging up with Maggie, I typed a reply to Robert. Hospital jello withdrawal is real. Thanks for checking in. His response came almost instantly. My professional recommendation reel, food and good company. Maybe dinner when you're feeling stronger. I stared at the message, my heart fluttering in a way that had nothing to do with angina. At 67, was I really being asked out by a handsome doctor? In the old version of my life, the one that existed just 3 days ago, would have brushed it off, made excuses, or buried the thought under everyone else's needs. But this was my new reality. With the weight of the lottery ticket in my pocket and the lightness of endless possibilities, I typed back, I'd like that very much. Later, I stood in front of my closet, staring at the plain, practical clothes that had defined Dorothy Wilson for decades. Teacher, mother, caretaker, always putting herself last. Time for some updates. I murmured, not because of Vanessa's cutting comment about my curtains, but because I could feel a new version of myself pushing forward. The woman who had survived being abandoned in an emergency room. The woman who held a ticket worth $4 million. The woman who was finally ready to put herself first. On Sunday, the hospital sent me home with a bag of prescriptions, a referral to a heart specialist, and strict instructions to avoid stress. Dr. Harris gave me that last bit, with a look that suggested he knew exactly how impossible that might be. Family can be our greatest support, he said, signing my discharge papers. Or our greatest source of stress. Which is yours? I asked, before I could stop myself. His pen froze for a moment. Both, at different times. My late wife was my rock for 30 years. My daughter in Seattle calls like clockwork once a month. Exactly 15 minutes, every time. He gave a small smile. Better than my son, I replied dryly. Gregory manages major holidays and emergencies when it fits his schedule. He handed me a card. Here's my direct number. Any concerns, day or night, please call. I slipped it into my purse, right next to the folded lottery ticket that had become my talisman. Not just money, but freedom. Thank you, Dr. Robert, he corrected gently, since I'm hoping you'll actually use that number. Before I could answer, Sophia appeared with a wheelchair. Ready for freedom, Mrs. Wilson. More than you know, I murmured, aware of Robert's eyes following me as she wheeled me away. Downstairs, Maggie was waiting in her Subaru, purple glasses catching the light, laughter already spilling out of her. As Sophia helped me in, she squeezed my hand again. Call me if you need anything. I'll be your nurse for the follow-up visits this week. You've got a fan, Maggie teased once we were driving, and maybe a doctor admirer too. Did you see how Dr. Dreamboat looked at you? Don't be silly, I said, though Robert's smile, complete with that boyish dimple, warmed me from the inside out. He's just being thorough. Thoroughly interested, Maggie said, smirking as she turned onto Maple Street. So, lottery winner, she asked, what now? Champagne? Shopping spree. Finally escaping these Minnesota winters. Not yet, I answered firmly. First, we watch. I want to see how Gregory and Vanessa act when they think nothing has changed. I turned to the window, watching the rows of identical houses roll by, families inside, doing their best with limited choices. Quiet, desperate lives, the same life I'd lived until now. I decided that before I made any big choices, I needed to see how Gregory and Vanessa behaved when they thought nothing had changed. My observation period started that same evening when, after more than 3 months, they finally showed up at my door. Right on the dot at 6:30, they arrived without the twins, carrying a grocery store bouquet and a rotisserie chicken. "We can't stay long, Mom," Gregory announced, already checking his watch. "The Hendersons invited us for drinks at 8. Vanessa leaned in with an air kiss, her diamond earrings sparkling. "Well, the hospital didn't mess up your hair too badly," she said, as if that were the most important thing after a heart scare. "Just my heart, dear," I replied lightly. "How are the twins?" "At a sleepover," Gregory muttered, eyes glued to his phone. "So, what exactly happened?" "Your text wasn't clear." I explained the angina diagnosis while heating up the chicken they'd brought, though it was obvious they had no interest in eating. Vanessa nodded now and then but spent more time judging my living room. "You really should update this place, Dorothy," she said, tugging at my curtains. "It looks so dated on a teacher's pension." "I'm afraid dated is what I can afford," I replied, raising an eyebrow. Gregory finally looked up. "Speaking of money, Mom, have you thought about that assisted living place we mentioned? Golden Sunset Acres. It's affordable, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance." There it was, the same push they'd been making for 2 years, a reasonable place that just happened to be the cheapest in the city, and conveniently far from their lake house. "I'm comfortable here," I said, setting out plates I knew they wouldn't touch. "This house is paid off, and I know all my neighbors." But after this heart scare Vanessa started. "Angina," I corrected, "not a heart attack." "Still," Gregory cut in, "you're not getting younger. What if something happens when you're alone?" This from the same son who'd left me waiting in the ER for 8 hours. I swallowed back the sharp response I wanted to give. Instead, I said calmly, "I'll manage. Sophia will be checking on me, and Maggie's just 3 blocks away." "Who's Sophia?" Vanessa asked, lifting a perfect eyebrow. "My home health nurse," I said, smiling at the thought of Sophia's kindness. "She'll be visiting 3 times this week." Gregory checked his watch again. "We should get going. The Hendersons are very punctual." And with that, they left chicken untouched, bouquet tossed on the counter, and my house feeling emptier than before they came. I stood at the window, watching their BMW pull away, making mental notes the way I had as a teacher for 35 years. Observation 1. A 20-minute visit after my hospitalization. Observation 2. No offer of help. Observation 3. Quick push toward assisted living. The pattern couldn't be clearer. To them, I wasn't a mother to Luva, I was a problem to manage. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're settling in. Missing hospital food yet, Robert? Dr. Harris." A smile tugged at my lips. Before I could answer, the landline rang. "Well, how was the Golden Boys' visit?" Maggie's eager voice asked. "Educational," I said, settling into my chair. "And brief. They had a social engagement." "Of course they did," Maggie snorted. "So, what's your next move? Powerball?" I ran my fingers over the folded lottery ticket I carried everywhere now. My secret reminder that everything had changed, even if no one else knew it yet. "I think it's time to dangle a little carrot," I said slowly. "A carrot?" "Yes. Tomorrow, I'll casually mention that Aunt Beatrice's estate finally settled, and I'll be receiving a modest inheritance. Nothing dramatic, maybe $75,000. Maggie burst out laughing. "Oh, Dot, that's brilliant. Enough to get their attention, but not enough to change their lives." "I'm learning to be clever," I replied, glancing at Robert's text again. "I'm learning a lot, actually." After hanging up, I typed my reply to Robert. "Hospital jello, withdrawal is real. Thanks for checking on me." His answer came almost instantly. "My professional recommendation, real food and good company. Maybe dinner when you're feeling stronger." I stared at the screen, my heart fluttering in a way that had nothing to do with angina. At 67, was I really being asked on a date by a handsome doctor? In my old life, the one I'd lived until just 3 days ago, I would have brushed it off, made excuses, put everyone else's happiness above my own. But now, with a lottery ticket in my pocket and new possibilities stretching out before me, I typed back, "I'd like that very much." I walked into my bedroom and opened the closet, looking at the plain, everyday clothes I had worn for years. They were the kind of clothes that showed Dorothy Wilson was a hardworking teacher and a mother who always put herself last. "Time for some updates," I whispered, not because of Vanessa's rude comment, but because I could feel a new version of myself trying to come alive. I wasn't just the woman who had been left alone in an emergency room. I wasn't just the woman who secretly won $4 million. I was becoming the woman who finally decided to put herself first. Later, when Gregory called, I told him I had inherited $75,000 from my Aunt Beatrice, a woman who, in truth, never existed. 75,000, he repeated, his voice jumping higher. After taxes and fees, I said calmly, watering my African violets. He sounded suspicious, asking why he'd never heard of her. I explained smoothly that she was my mother's sister from Dooth, and though we hadn't been close, family ties mattered in her will. It surprised me how easily the lie rolled off my tongue. For 35 years of teaching, I had prided myself on honesty. But this wasn't really a lie, it was more like an experiment, a way to see how people react to money. Gregory went quiet, probably doing the math in his head. Not enough to change your life, but just enough to tempt someone. We should talk about how to manage this, Mom. It's literally my job. I told him I was already meeting with a bank manager. He quickly warned me that bank managers only push what earns them the most. Let me help. I'll bring in my team's wealth advisor, he insisted. I had to laugh quietly to myself. It had taken him just 4 days after hearing about the money to suddenly clear space in his busy life. For days, when he couldn't even spare 1 hour while I was in the hospital. That's thoughtful, I said. Why don't you and Vanessa come for dinner Friday, and we can talk about it? He agreed right away, even offering to bring the advisor along. Actually, I interrupted. Let's just keep it family for now. I'm still processing. After we hung up, I sat in my sunny kitchen, thinking about how quickly my little story had stirred up interest. Gregory's sudden attention, his eagerness to manage money he thought was mine, it all proved what I had long suspected but tried to ignore. The truth stung, but it also cleared the air, like finally draining an old wound. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Sophia, my nurse, her bright smile lifting the heavy mood as she walked in with her bag. Home visit time, she said cheerfully. How are you feeling today, Mrs. Wilson? Dorothy, please, I corrected, sitting at the kitchen table. And honestly, enlightened. She raised an eyebrow while wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. That's not usually on the checklist, she teased. I laughed. It's new. As she checked my vitals, I opened up about Gregory's sudden interest in my so-called inheritance. I left out the lottery, of course, but shared the rest. Sophia shook her head knowingly. People get weird about money. My cousin Pablo won $10,000 once, and family he hadn't seen in years suddenly came asking for loans. He told everyone he lost it on a bad investment, but really, he used it to send his sister to nursing school. I smiled at the cleverness of it, protecting himself while still doing something good. After she finished, she reminded me my blood pressure was still high. Are you taking your medication? Every day, I promised. But yes, the stress doesn't help. She gave me a look that told me she could see more than I was saying. I'm doing better than you think, I added. Seeing things clearly is freeing. Sophia studied me closely. You remind me of my boy. She spent 40 years with a husband who barely noticed her. When he died, she said it felt like being let out of a beautiful cage she hadn't realized she was in. I leaned forward, curious. What did she do with her freedom? Sophia's eyes sparkled. Everything. She traveled back to Mexico to see her childhood home, took painting classes, even dated a man 20 years younger. She always said life was too short for appropriate choices. I laughed at that, thinking about Robert's dinner invitation for Saturday. At 67 maybe, I was finally ready for some inappropriate choices myself. Your grandmother sounds amazing, I said softly. Sophia smiled. She passed away last year at 92, but she had no regrets. She'd have liked you. After she left, I found myself back at my closet, staring at the same old clothes, and realizing they belonged to a woman I was quickly outgrowing. Most of my clothes were the same plain slacks, simple blouses, and cardigans in dull colors. They were the kind of outfits a woman wore when she wanted to blend in, not stand out. But that day, something inside me snapped. I picked up the phone and called Maggie. I need to go shopping, I blurted out as soon as she answered. Finally, music to my ears, she said, her voice full of excitement. What's the occasion? I have a dinner date Saturday. Her squeal was so loud it probably set off car alarms across 3 counties. With Dr. Dreamy. Spill it. I need details right now. Nothing to tell yet, I laughed. But I need something to wear that doesn't scream retired school teacher. Oh, honey, she said, your whole wardrobe is screaming that. Plus, it's yelling comfortable shoes and early bird dinner specials. Exactly why I called you, I replied. 2 hours later, we were at Argyle Mall, a place I usually avoided because the prices gave me hives. Maggie, however, was on a mission. She grabbed dresses left and right, tossing aside anything beige, shapeless, or too much like what I already owned. You need color, she declared, shoving a bright sapphire blue dress into my hands. and shape. You've been hiding under potato sacks for decades. In the dressing room, I stood in front of the three-way mirror and barely recognized myself. It was still me, the same silver-streaked brown hair, the same green eyes, but the dress hugged me in all the right places. Instead of hiding everything, the blue fabric made my eyes look brighter, and my skin almost glowed. "Oh my," I whispered. "Good oh my or bad oh my?" Maggie called from outside. I opened the door, and she let out a sharp whistle. "Hot damn, Dorothy, where have you been hiding that body?" "Under cardigans, apparently," I said, turning to check the back view. The dress was elegant, but not over the top, just enough to feel special. "We'll take it," Maggie told the saleswoman. "And those black heels, and that silver necklace, Maggie." I started eyeing the price tags. "Not your problem anymore, lottery queen," she whispered. "Think of it as an investment in your new life." My old instincts fought back. For decades, I pinched pennies, and now here I was, holding a dress that cost more than I'd usually spend in a year. But then again, I wasn't living my usual life anymore. I had $4 million. I had dinner dates with handsome doctors. I wasn't the same woman who wore beige cardigans and practical shoes. "We'll take it all," I agreed. Later, with our shopping bags safely tucked in Maggie's trunk, we sat at a cafe, sipping lattes and splitting a chocolate croissant. "So," Maggie asked, "what's the plan for dinner with Gregory and Vanessa tomorrow? More field notes for your social experiment?" "Exactly," I said, smiling over my overpriced coffee. "I want to see how they handle the inheritance face to face. My guess, Vanessa will mentally redecorate my whole house before dessert, and Gregory will figure out how to invest my $75,000 in whatever makes him the biggest commission." "Probably," Maggie agreed. The sad part was that she was right. And yet, instead of breaking my heart, the truth felt like a relief. For the first time, I was really seeing them for who they were. "And what about Dr. Robert?" she asked with a sly smile. "Seeing him clearly, too." I thought of his recent texts. They weren't pushy or needy, just kind and funny. A silly meme about hospital jobs. A heart-healthy cookbook suggestion that actually looked appetizing. A photo of his golden retriever, Max, grinning like a fool. "I'm reserving judgment," I admitted. "But it feels different. Like he actually sees me, not what I can do for him." "That's how it should be." Maggie said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "That's how it should have always been." On the drive home, I stared out at the neat lawns and copy-paste houses. I thought about the strange chain of events that brought me here. A random lottery ticket, a heart scare, 8 lonely hours in an emergency room. Life was funny that way. "A week ago," I said out loud, "I was just a retired teacher with chest pains. Now I'm a millionaire with a social experiment, a dinner date, and killer new shoes." Maggie laughed. "Don't forget the shoes." "For the first time in decades," I said, laughing with her, "I feel alive. Really alive." It was ironic, I thought. It took a heart problem to finally wake up my heart. Tomorrow, Gregory and Vanessa would come with their fake concern and hidden agendas. Saturday would bring Robert and a date I hadn't dared dream about in years. Beyond that stretched something bigger: choice, freedom, and the chance to become the Dorothy Wilson I was always meant to be. As Maggie pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from Robert. "Looking forward to Saturday." And for once, I truly was too. Max had apparently demanded that I share embarrassing doctor stories to keep everyone laughing. Robert's text made me smile, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with heart problems. "Good news?" Maggie asked, noticing the grin on my face. "Just a reminder," I said, "that it's never too late to start over." At exactly 6:30 on Friday evening, Gregory and Vanessa arrived in their shiny BMW, pulling into my driveway like they were on parade. They came armed with gifts this time. A fancy bottle of red wine, a smug reminder it was heart healthy, and a glossy brochure for a financial company. The twins were, once again, missing. "They have swim lessons Friday nights," Vanessa explained as she air-kissed my cheek, her eyes already scanning my living room like a real estate agent, deciding what to list it for. "The instructor is impossible to reschedule." "Of course," I murmured, taking the wine from Gregory. "I've made pot roast, your favorite when you were growing up." "Great, Mom. Listen, before dinner, I thought we could quickly go over the inheritance," Gregory said, pulling out his phone like a businessman about to pitch a client. "I'm sure you have been running numbers," I thought silently, but smiled politely. "Let's eat first, shall we? Money talk gives me indigestion." Vanessa laughed too loudly. "Dorothy, you're just too funny." but Gregory's right. Your health makes it important to get this money managed properly. My health is exactly why I'd like to enjoy dinner first, I said sweetly, leading them to the dining room. I had set the table with my grandmother's china, the kind usually saved for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Wow, Mom. Pulling out the good stuff, Gregory said, sitting in his old seat. Special occasion, I replied. Having my son and daughter-in-law for dinner is always special. For a second, his face twitched. Guilt. Maybe. Good. Let him squirm a little. The meal went as expected. Vanessa dominated the conversation, bragging about her charity work, the twins' private school awards, and their upcoming ski trip to Vail. I nodded, asked polite questions, and listened carefully, not to the stories, but to the performance, because that's all it was. Gregory asking about my medications, Vanessa pretending to care about my garden club, both of them praising my pot roast, even though Gregory had hated it since he was a teenager. By the time I served coffee and homemade apple pie, I knew the real show was about to start. So, Mom, Gregory began carefully, about Aunt Beatrice's inheritance. You really shouldn't keep that money just sitting in a checking account. With the right investments, you could see real growth. Oh, I asked, pretending to be naive. The bank manager suggested a simple CD. Gregory nearly choked on his pie. ACD, Mom, you'd be lucky to get 2%. Well, at my age, safety feels better than risky growth, I said calmly. But what about your future? Vanessa jumped in, setting her untouched pie aside. Care facilities are getting so expensive. Ah, there it was, the not-so-subtle push to picture myself tucked away in a home. I'm comfortable here, I reminded her. For now, Gregory said. But eventually, of course, eventually, they weren't thinking about me, they were thinking about the money. Actually, I said, stirring my coffee, I was considering some renovations, maybe updating the kitchen, fixing that bathroom tile. The look of panic on their faces was priceless. Renovations are terrible investments, Gregory said quickly. You never get the money back. And so disruptive, Vanessa added. Dust, strangers in your house, weeks of chaos. Just an idea, I said lightly, hiding my smile. Gregory leaned in. Why don't I set up a meeting with my firm's advisor? No pressure. He specializes in situations like yours. My situation? I asked. Seniors with modest savings, he clarified. I nodded as though I was seriously considering it. I'll think about it. Then I changed the subject. Oh, before I forget, would you and the twins like to come for lunch on Sunday? I hardly ever see my grandchildren. They glanced at each other, having one of those silent, married conversations I knew all too well from my years with Thomas. This Sunday is tough, Gregory said at last. The twins have make-up tennis lessons. And then there's the Petersons' brunch. Gregory's excuse landed neatly on top of Vanessa's. Another time then, I said, forcing my disappointment to stay out of my voice. I know how busy family life can be. An hour later, they finally gathered their things to leave. Gregory checking his watch every few minutes, Vanessa fluttering about with her air-kiss goodbyes. Just before walking out, Vanessa paused at the mantel. Is this photo new? I don't remember seeing it before. It was a picture of me at 20, standing on a rocky shore in Maine, my hair whipping in the wind as I laughed at the camera. Thomas had taken it during a college trip, years before we ever dated. It's actually very old, I told her. I just put it out recently. You were quite pretty, she said, with the same tone you might use. Discovering your blender once won a beauty contest. Thank you, I replied, studying the girl in the photo. I had forgotten her for a long time. After they left, Gregory promising to email me investment materials, Vanessa tossing out vague plans to get together soon. I stood in the doorway watching their taillights fade. The evening had confirmed what I already knew. To them, I wasn't a mother to cherish. I was a responsibility, an asset, a bank account. And while that truth should have broken my heart, it didn't. It felt strangely freeing. I washed my grandmother's china carefully, piece by piece. Those dishes had seen it all. 50 years of family dinners, holiday arguments, Sunday roasts, the laughter of children, the silence of widowhood. They had survived marriages, moves, and even my tears when I learned to eat alone. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophia, checking in on my favorite patient. Blood pressure holding steady. I grinned and typed back, just hosted my son and daughter in. Shockingly, blood pressure stayed normal. Her reply came quick. Progress or good meds. Either way, a win. A second text followed. Dinner with Dr. H tomorrow. Right, tomorrow, my date. Was I nervous? Terrified was more like it. 37 years since my last first date. What were the rules now? Terrified, I admitted. Her answer was simple. Just be yourself. He already likes that person. Later, Maggie called, demanding a full play-by-play of the evening's performance, as she called Gregory and Vanessa's visits. Exactly as predicted, I told her. Very concerned about my finances. Completely against renovations. Still pushing for assisted living. No twins, of course. Shocked. I am shocked, Maggie said dryly. And the inheritance bait, swallowed whole. Gregory's already planning my portfolio. Of course he is. But are you okay? Really okay? I paused, looking around my quiet little house. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm awake. After we hung up, I went to my closet. My new blue dress was still wrapped in tissue paper, waiting. I ran my hand over the soft fabric and thought of the girl in the photograph, young, laughing, alive with possibilities. Tomorrow, I would wear the dress for Robert, but really, I would be wearing it for her. For the Dorothy I'd misplaced somewhere between marriage and widowhood, motherhood and heartache. I was finding her again, one choice at a time. Just before bed, a final text lit up my phone from Robert. Looking forward to tomorrow. Sleep well, Dorothy. 3 simple sentences. No pressure, no hidden motives. Just kindness. I slept more peacefully than I had in years. Sunday morning came with the quiet beauty of spring in Minnesota, birds chattering, dew shining on the grass, sunlight spilling warmth over everything. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, replaying last night with Robert and sneaking looks at my phone. 2 messages from Maggie, details now, and if you don't call me, I'm coming over. 1 from Sophia, hope the date was wonderful. Blood pressure check tomorrow. Try not to be too excited. And 1 from Robert, thank you for a lovely evening. Max insists the dog park date happens soon. Nothing from Gregory or Vanessa about Sunday lunch, but I hadn't expected any. Their interest in me only stretched as far as my inheritance. Not to me, not to us. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Maggie stood on the porch in her gardening clothes, phone still in her hand. 8 hours of silence is friendship malpractice, she declared, brushing past me into the kitchen. I've been dying to know how last night went. I poured her some coffee and gave her the highlights. The restaurant, the easy conversation, the walk afterward, and the goodnight kiss. He kissed you. Maggie clapped her soil-stained hands together. Was it good? Was there tongue? Are we teenagers again? I laughed, my cheeks heating up. We most certainly are not. It was sweet, appropriate, nice. Maggie wrinkled her nose. Dorothy Wilson, you need a vocabulary upgrade. Nice is for church potlucks and thank you notes, not for a first kiss after 37 years of drought. Fine, I admitted. It was promising. That's more like it, she said, grinning. So, are there going to be more promising developments? Second date, I said. Dog park with Max. The dogs already meeting the family, moving fast, Dr. Dreamboat. I tossed a dish towel at her. Stop it, we're just 2 older people enjoying each other's company. Keep telling yourself that, Maggie said, dodging the towel. So any updates from Gregory the financial genius? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Mom, slight change of plans. I'm coming by with Stanley today at 3. Won't take long, just wants to discuss some preliminary investment strategies. No need to prepare anything. I handed Maggie the phone. Unbelievable, she muttered. Can't make lunch with his kids, but he's free to bring a financial advisor on a Sunday. Classic Gregory. The old disappointment flickered inside me, but it was quickly followed by something newer clarity. At least now I could see it all for what it was. Maggie left soon after, promising to demand more details about Robert later. I spent the late morning in the garden, losing myself in the rhythm of pulling weeds and coaxing green shoots from the dirt. For decades, growing vegetables had been less of a hobby and more of a survival tactic. But today, it felt like pure pleasure. At exactly 3 o'clock, Gregory arrived with his advisor, Stanley Winraba, balding man in his 50s with an expensive watch and the double handshake of someone who had studied how to win friends and influence people a little too closely. Mrs. Wilson, delighted to meet you, he boomed, accepting the iced tea I offered. Gregory speaks so highly of you, does he? I asked, watching my son glance down at his phone for the 5th time in 7 minutes. Let's get right to it, Stanley said, spreading glossy brochures across my kitchen table. Gregory mentioned you've come into a modest inheritance. First, let me offer condolences on your loss. Thank you, I replied smoothly, though Aunt Beatrice and I weren't close. Of course. Now, $75,000 may not seem like much in today's economy. I noticed Gregory wince at Stanley's lack of tact. but properly managed, it can significantly improve your financial security. And with that, Stanley launched into his pitch: growth potential, professional management, charts and graphs, the whole song and dance. I nodded politely, sneaking glances at Gregory's face. He wasn't looking at me as his mother, he was looking at me as a client. Or, worse, a commission. These particular funds have performed exceptionally well, Stanley continued, sliding a chart toward me, with management fees of only 1.75% annually. That seems high, I interrupted mildly. The index funds I've read about charge as little as 0.04%. Both men froze, as if the family dog had suddenly quoted Shakespeare. Well, yes, Stanley stammered, but index funds don't provide active management. Our expertise justifies the premium. I see. And these actively managed funds consistently outperform index funds. Gregory shifted uncomfortably. Mom, these are complex financial products. Stanley's team has decades of experience. It's a simple question, I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. Do your funds consistently beat index funds? Stanley cleared his throat. Markets fluctuate, of course. No investment is guaranteed. So, that's a no, I said, leaning back. Interesting. Gregory's phone buzzed. He grabbed it like a lifeline and excused himself to take a work call. The second the door shut behind him, Stanley leaned in, lowering his voice. Mrs. Wilson, between us, your son is concerned about your financial decision-making. Given your recent health challenges, the condescension lit a fire in me. My heart may be troublesome, Mr. Winrob, but my brain works perfectly well. I taught advanced literature for 35 years. I've been reading extensively about investment strategies since receiving my inheritance. And frankly, I find your fees excessive, and your manner patronizing. Stanley blinked, clearly unused to pushback from a gray-haired woman in sensible shoes. I assure you, Mrs. Wilson, Stanley began, trying to sound smooth, and I assure you, I cut in, my voice steady, that I find it very interesting my son, who couldn't spare an hour to visit me in the hospital last week, suddenly has plenty of time for financial meetings on a Sunday. That was the exact moment Gregory returned, phone in hand, his timing just a little too perfect. Everything okay? He asked, noticing Stanley's stiff expression. Mr. Winrob was just explaining the benefits of active management, I said politely, but I think I'll need more time to consider my options. Mom, these opportunities don't last forever, Gregory pushed, his tone sliding into the patronizing one I knew too well. Stanley is taking you on as a favor to me, even though your portfolio is, well, below his usual minimum. That little jabbed at dismissal. The suggestion that my money and my judgment weren't quite good enough snapped everything into focus. I appreciate the concern, I said, standing to signal the meeting was over. But I'll handle my inheritance my way. But, Mom, my way. Gregory, I repeated firmly. Now, I believe you both have busy schedules to get back to. Stanley scrambled to collect his glossy brochures, while Gregory stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. We'll continue this discussion later, he said, clearly convinced my resistance was just a phase. Perhaps, I replied calmly. Give my love to the twins, since they couldn't come for lunch. Maybe next Sunday. Gregory muttered something about checking calendars as the two of them left. I stood in the doorway, watching yet another set of taillights disappear down my street. That had become quite the Sunday ritual. But this time, instead of sinking into disappointment, I felt something else, something better. Pride. Pride that I had stood my ground. Pride that I had honored my own intelligence. Pride that I had finally admitted what my relationship with my son really was, instead of clinging to what I wished it to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Max insists we move the dog park date to this afternoon. He's being quite insistent. Free at 5. I glanced at Stanley's abandoned fee disclosure papers still lying on the table, then out at the bright spring day. The choice between spreadsheets and sunshine was obvious. 5 would be perfect, I texted back. I look forward to meeting the real boss of your household. As I changed into casual clothes, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My smile was easy, my eyes bright. I looked more alive than I had in years. The woman who had once sat alone in an emergency room, abandoned and uncertain, was gone. In her place was someone clearer, stronger, and if I was honest, much more interesting. I couldn't wait to get to know her. At the dog park, Max the golden retriever threw himself into life like each moment was the best thing that had ever happened. Within minutes, he had dropped his tennis ball at my feet 17 times, introduced me to every dog in sight, and decorated my navy pants with a layer of golden fur that I suspected would never fully wash out. He's usually more reserved with strangers, Robert said apologetically, reaching for the slimy ball yet again. Clearly, I'm special, I teased, scratching Max's ears as he leaned against me with all his weight. Clearly you are. Robert's words, said simply and without any hidden agenda, warmed me more than the spring sunshine. We walked the park's edge, talking about ordinary things: his daughter's tech career in Seattle, my summer garden plans, our favorite hiking trails in Minnesota. It wasn't anything grand, but it felt profoundly comfortable. As we sat on a bench watching Max charm a labradoodle, I mentioned, Gregory called earlier, left a voicemail about reconsidering Stanley's investment proposal. Ah, Robert said, raising an eyebrow. The son who left you sitting in an emergency room for 8 hours? I nodded, surprised at his bluntness. Is he always this interested in your finances? Only recently, I admitted, since he found out about my inheritance. Robert studied me with kind, perceptive eyes. And that bothers you? It does, I confessed softly, though I feel guilty saying so. He's my son. Robert gave a small, almost sad smile. Being someone's parent doesn't mean you have to accept poor treatment. He paused, then added wryly, says the man whose daughter calls exactly once every 3 months for 15 minutes. What happened there? I asked gently. He sighed, tossing the ball for Max's 100th retrieval. Melissa blames me for her mother's death. Not directly. Louise died of breast cancer, something no one could have prevented. But I was the doctor who didn't notice the signs in my own wife until it was stage 4. Melissa thinks I was too wrapped up in my patients to see what was happening at home. She might be right. The honesty in Robert's words hit me harder than I expected. We all have regrets about our children, I said softly. Things we'd do differently if we had another chance. What about you? What would you change with Gregory? He asked. The question caught me off guard. I'd always clung to the story of what I'd done right as a mother, the sacrifices, the chances I gave him, the love poured in every day. Admitting what I hadn't done well felt almost like betrayal. Still, after a moment I said, I'd set better boundaries. I'd show him that love doesn't mean giving up yourself, that relationships should go both ways. I reached down to pet Max, who had faithfully dropped his tennis ball at my feet again, and I'd stopped making excuses for his behavior. That's very insightful, Robert said. It's very recent, I admitted. Amazing how 8 hours in an emergency room can clear your vision. We let the conversation drift to lighter things after that, but the thought stuck with me. Had I, by always giving in, taught Gregory that my needs didn't matter, that I was optional? Later, as Robert drove me home, Max sprawled happily across the back seat. I didn't feel like someone who had solved every problem, but I felt steady, like I was finally asking the questions I should have been asking all along. At my door, Robert turned to me. I'd like to see you again. Something more formal than the dog park. There's a chamber music concert at the Ordway next Saturday. I'd love that, I said, and I meant it. Our goodnight kiss lingered just a little longer than before, not rushed, not demanding, but carrying a quiet promise. When his car pulled away, my phone buzzed. A text from Gregory. Mom, we need to talk about today. Stanley was only trying to help. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I silenced my phone and ran a bath, adding a few drops of the lavender oil Sophia had given me for stress. As the warm water wrapped around me, I thought about the two very different parts of my day. Gregory and Stanley had left me feeling small, managed, and useful only as a bank account. Robert and Max had left me feeling seen, respected, and valued simply for being me. The choice between those two energies suddenly felt so clear. The next morning, Sophia arrived for my checkup, her usual bright smile filling my kitchen. Blood pressure's better, she announced, tapping on her tablet. Still taking your meds? Like clockwork, I said. No chest pain either. Good. And stress? She asked, raising an eyebrow. How was the meeting with your son? I grimaced. Exactly as expected. A pushy advisor, a dismissive son, and lots of assumptions about my brain. Typical, Sophia said with a roll of her eyes. When my Uncle Juan won a small settlement, suddenly his kids turned into finance experts too. She grinned. So he told them he gave it all to his church. Meanwhile, he secretly bought a vintage motorcycle he'd wanted since he was 20, rides it every Sunday while they think he's at Mass. I laughed out loud at the image. Smart man. Smart enough to know happiness doesn't wait forever, she said, packing up her bag. Speaking of, how was your date with Dr. Harris? Lovely, I admitted, feeling my cheeks warm. We're seeing each other again Saturday. Good for you, Sophia said, sounding genuinely pleased. Life's too short to waste on people who don't see your worth. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, falling back into my old teacher habit of making lists. On the left side, I wrote obligations, doctor's appointments, medications, bills, house upkeep. On the right, I wrote choices, Gregory, Vanessa, the inheritance drama, my volunteer work at the library, the garden club I'd never really liked, the church committee that felt more like duty than faith. Staring at the two columns, something hit me. I'd been living as if everything were an obligation, when really, most of it was choice. Choices I could change. Just then, the doorbell rang. Maggie stood there waving the newspaper like a victory flag. Have you seen this? She demanded, spreading the real estate section across my table. Your neighbor's place just sold for $375,000. That dump is half the size of yours and doesn't have any of your updates. I blinked down at the listing, recognizing the Johnsons' modest Rambler 3 doors down, smaller lot, outdated kitchen, worn siding, yet it had fetched that price. Minneapolis real estate has gone crazy, Maggie said. Your place must be worth at least $450,000 now. An idea surfaced at first hazy, then sharp. What if I sold it? I asked quietly. Maggie stared at me. What? But you love this house. All your memories with Thomas, raising Gregory. Yes, I said, gesturing to the notepad on the table. But maybe those memories are keeping me stuck in patterns that don't serve me anymore. What if this house has become more museum than home? Dorothy Wilson, Maggie said, studying me with both concern and admiration. First new clothes, then dating, now real estate upheaval. What's gotten into you lately? Life, I said simply. Life has finally gotten into me. That evening, I called a realtor, not Gregory's recommendation, for when you're ready for assisted living, but Lisa Reynolds, someone Maggie trusted. Just an assessment, I told her. I'm not committed to selling, of course, Lisa said, but it's always smart to know your options. How about Wednesday morning for a walkthrough? After I hung up, Gregory's name lit my phone again. Mom, getting concerned by your silence. Need to talk about these investment decisions before you make a mistake. Dinner tomorrow. I'll bring Stanley's documents. The old Dorothy would have agreed, instantly grateful for her son's attention, bending to his schedule, deferring to his judgment, but that Dorothy had been left waiting in an emergency room for 8 hours. This Dorothy typed a different reply. Sorry, I'm not available tomorrow evening, taking a watercolor class with Maggie. Maybe next week. And Gregory, while I appreciate your concern, I'll be making my own financial decisions. Love, Mom. I hit send before I could lose my nerve, then sat with the anxiety of possibly disappointing my only child. But soon the fear gave way to something else, something that felt a lot like freedom. I'll take it, I said later, standing inside the sunlit corner unit of the Mississippi River lofts. Lisa blinked. Don't you want to think it over? Measure for furniture. Consider the HOA fees. But I didn't need to. From the moment I'd stepped into that space with its soaring ceilings, exposed brick, and windows framing the Minneapolis skyline, I had felt it. Recognition, brightness, home. Sometimes you just know, I said, moving toward the glass. I can make an offer today. 2 hours later, I was in Lisa's office signing the paperwork. My offer slightly under asking, but with quick closing, and no contingencies would be submitted before the day ended. We don't usually see decisions this fast, Lisa said, watching me sign the last page. Especially in this price range. The condo cost nearly as much as my house would sell for, leaving me little cushion outside my lottery winnings, a secret I'd only shared with Maggie. I've spent decades being cautious, I told her. It's time for something different. Lisa smiled, a touch of admiration in her eyes. Well, Mrs. Wilson, I think you're making an excellent choice. This building rarely had openings, and the location was perfect. I floated home on adrenaline and possibility, stopping at a little bistro for a celebratory glass of wine. A small rebellion after decades of practical choices. Sitting on the patio, watching Minneapolis professionals hurry by on their way home, I called Maggie. I bought a condo, I announced the second she answered. A loft downtown, with a river view. Her squeal of delight turned heads at nearby tables. Dorothy Wilson, you magnificent rebel. When can I see it? When do you move? Does Gregory know? If the offer's accepted, I'll close in 3 weeks. And no, Gregory doesn't know yet. I'll tell him once it's finalized. He'll have opinions, Maggie warned. He always has opinions, I said, smiling. But this isn't his decision. Damn straight. Then her voice softened. I'm proud of you. It takes courage to change your life this dramatically, especially on your own. I'm not really alone though, am I? I've got you, and Sophia, and Robert. Speaking of the good doctor, have you told him about your big move? Isn't his place nearby? Not yet, I admitted, sipping my wine, and yes, he lives about a mile away. But that's coincidental, not causal. Maggie's tone was pure skepticism. Just like it's coincidental, you've had that special smile since your first date. What special smile? The one you're wearing right now. Just talking about him. I touched my face, suddenly self-conscious, realizing she was right. It's early days, Maggie. We're just getting to know each other. At our age, early days are a luxury we can't afford. Life's short, then you die. Speaking of which, when are you going to tell people about the lottery win? The abrupt pivot made me glance around nervously, though no one cared about a gray-haired woman having wine alone. Once I'm settled in the new place, one bombshell at a time. Fair enough, but promise you'll let me be there when you tell Gregory. I want to see his face when he finds out his budget-conscious mother is secretly loaded. Later, I walked home through quiet neighborhoods, the architecture shifting from family houses to the urban skyline that would soon be mine. The weight of my house key in my palm suddenly felt temporary, an artifact of a life I was already leaving behind. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Thinking of you today. Hope your mysterious appointment went well. Still on for the concert Saturday? I smiled, that special smile Maggie had teased me about, and replied, appointment was life-changing. Actually, can't wait to tell you about it Saturday. His response came quickly. Intriguing. Now I'll be distracted with curiosity for the next 48 hours. Cruel woman. The playful exchange, so different from the logistics and agenda messages I got from Gregory, warmed me as I turned onto my street. By Monday, the for sale sign would be planted in my yard. By summer's end, this walk home would belong to someone else. The thought filled me with anticipation, not grief, but possibility. As I approached my driveway, I noticed a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows parked out front. The vanity plate read, Vanessa 1. Unexpected and unannounced. I found my daughter-in-law waiting on my porch, immaculately dressed in the season's designer collection, scrolling through her phone with manicured precision. Vanessa, I greeted, hiding my surprise. This is unexpected. She rose gracefully, air-kissing my cheek with practiced ease. Dorothy, I was just in the neighborhood for Pilates and thought I'd stop by. Hope that's all right. In 15 years of marriage to Gregory, Vanessa had never just stopped by. Vanessa's visits were always planned, quick, and usually buffered by Gregory. She had never once shown up on her own. This little drop-by could only mean one thing: she was here with an agenda. Of course, I said as I unlocked the door. Come in. Would you like some tea? Sparkling water, if you have it, she answered, following me inside. Still trying to lose the last 5 pounds from our Vail trip, I held back the thought that her already railed-in frame hardly needed trimming, and instead grabbed the Pellegrino I kept on hand for the occasional guest who turned up their nose at tap water. So, I said, settling into my chair across from her, what brings you by, Vanessa? She took a dainty sip before answering. Gregory mentioned you might be selling the house. I thought I could help. It can be so overwhelming. All the details, the negotiations, the financial side, and at your stage of life, it's easy to make emotional decisions instead of practical ones. There it was, the polite but cutting assumption that my age meant I couldn't manage my own affairs. I appreciate your concern, I said evenly, but I've hired a very competent realtor. Yes, Lisa Reynolds. Gregory told me. Her tone made Lisa sound like a Pacali fortune teller rather than a respected professional. But real estate is just one piece. There's the bigger question of where you'll live after. I'm exploring my options, I replied carefully. Vanessa leaned in, her eyes bright with purpose. Gregory and I were thinking this might be the perfect time for you to consider Whispering Pines. It's a beautiful continuing care community in Eden Prairie. Very exclusive. They have independent apartments, plus assisted living and memory care when the time comes. There it was again, that gentle shove toward a future I hadn't asked for. How thoughtful, I said, keeping my tone polite. But I'm not interested in a community like that right now. Dorothy, I know change is scary at your age, she said, her expression all rehearsed sympathy. But imagine no chores, no worries, people your own age to socialize with, dining, medical staff, on-site. Wouldn't that be wonderful? It does sound nice, I agreed, for someone who needs it, but I don't. Not yet, she pressed. But it's smart to think ahead. With the money from this house, you could secure your place now. There's even a waiting list. I studied her perfect face, seeing past the sugar-coated words. Vanessa didn't care about my well-being. She cared about managing me, packaging me neatly into a facility that required little of her time, while keeping Gregory's inheritance safe and untouched. Actually, I said, surprising even myself, I've already found my next home, a loft downtown. I put in an offer this afternoon. For the first time, her polished mask slipped. A loft downtown. Dorothy, that's not practical. The crime, the noise, no real community. I find it very suitable, I said calmly, and quite practical for me. But the cost. She nearly sputtered. Downtown real estate is ridiculously overpriced. You'll burn through your proceeds, even your savings. How will you pay for long-term care? Her panic wasn't about me. It was about money, my money. Money she clearly considered hers someday. I'll manage, I said, smiling just enough to end the conversation. I've always been careful with money. Her phone buzzed, and she checked it quickly before rising. Gregory needs me home. But Dorothy, please don't make any rash decisions. At least talk to Stanley again before you commit to this loft idea. I walked her to the door, keeping my pleasant expression in place through another one of her air kisses. I promised I'd think carefully about my decisions. As her black Mercedes pulled away, I felt no anger, only gratitude. Her transparent motives had reminded me of what the emergency room had already shown me. To Gregory and Vanessa, I was a responsibility to manage and an asset to protect, but not for much longer. Not in my new loft, with its sweeping river views and theaters and restaurants within walking distance. Not with Robert's townhouse, only a mile away. Not with the quiet truth of my lottery millions tucked safely out of their reach. Not in this new life, where Dorothy Wilson finally at long last chose herself. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.